For most of human history, pornography was difficult to access. If somebody wanted explicit material decades ago, they had to go out of their way to find it. There was effort involved, there was embarrassment involved, there were barriers. You had to buy a magazine, rent a tape, hide it somewhere, and risk somebody finding out. Today, a 12-year-old with a phone has access to more explicit content in 10 minutes than an adult in 1985 could have seen in an entire lifetime. That is one of the biggest psychological experiments ever performed on humanity. And it happened almost overnight. Nobody stopped to ask what unlimited online pornography would do to the human brain, to relationships, to self esteem, to motivation, or to an entire generation growing up with it before they even understood what intimacy actually was. Almost everybody has seen porn. Many people struggle with it. Some people think it's harmless entertainment, others think it's addictive. Most people are somewhere in the middle. The internet changed pornography from something occasional into something constant, and when anything becomes constant, it changes people, especially young people. The newer generations are the first humans in history to grow up with unlimited stimulation available 24 hours a day. Not just porn, but TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, streaming, gaming, notifications, constant dopamine. Porn just happens to be one of the strongest versions of it because it taps directly into one of the most powerful instincts humans have: sex. And when you combine that instinct with algorithms designed to keep people watching for as long as possible, you create something incredibly hard to resist. That's where a lot of the problems begin. A lot of kids today are exposed to porn before they even have their first relationship. Their first understanding of intimacy doesn't come from real human connection, it comes from a screen, from actors, from edited videos, from exaggerated situations designed entirely around stimulation. That would be like learning how relationships work from reality TV, or learning how to drive from Fast and Furious movies. It creates unrealistic expectations from the very beginning. And over time, those expectations leak into real life. People start comparing themselves to what they see online. Guys compare their bodies, confidence, experience, performance. Girls compare their appearance and worth, and everybody loses. No real person can compete with an endless stream of fantasy designed by algorithms. Online porn is not static anymore. It adapts, it learns what keeps people engaged, the same way social media apps learn what videos keep you scrolling. The internet figured out how to monetize human attention, and porn became one of the most profitable versions of that system. So, people consume more extreme content over time. Not necessarily because they want to, but because the brain gets desensitized. What shocked somebody at 15 becomes normal. And I think society downplays it because talking about porn honestly makes people uncomfortable. But discomfort doesn't make something untrue. One major effect I think we're seeing is emotional numbness, not just sexually, but emotionally in general. A lot of younger people talk about feeling disconnected, unmotivated, anxious, isolated, depressed. Now, obviously, porn is not the only reason for that. Life is more complicated than one cause. But I do think constant overstimulation plays a huge role. And when your brain gets flooded with easy dopamine every day, normal life can start to feel dull. Real relationships take patience, real attraction builds slowly. Real intimacy involves awkwardness, vulnerability, insecurity, effort. Porn removes all of that. It gives instant gratification with no risk of rejection. And the brain loves easy rewards. The problem is that easy rewards often weaken people over time. You see this in a lot of areas of life. Fast food tastes good but destroys health. Endless scrolling feels entertaining but destroys attention span. Porn feels satisfying temporarily, but for many people, it slowly damages their view of relationships and themselves. And yes, I know some people will say, well, studies are mixed, or not everybody who watches porn has problems. That's true. Not everybody who drinks alcohol becomes an alcoholic either. That doesn't mean addiction isn't real. And I think one of the biggest mistakes modern culture makes is pretending that because something is common, it must also be harmless. Those are not the same thing. Something can be normalized and still hurt people. In fact, some of the most destructive things in history became normal before society recognized the damage. Another thing I notice with younger generations is fear of intimacy. People talk all the time online about how dating feels broken, ghosting, commitment issues, fear of vulnerability, fear of rejection, fear of emotional closeness. Now, again, porn is not the only cause. Social media, modern dating apps, and general internet culture all contribute too. But porn absolutely affects how people connect because it trains the brain to separate sexual stimulation from emotional connection. That separation matters more than people think. When intimacy becomes something consumed instead of experienced, relationships start feeling transactional. People become products, bodies become content, connection becomes performance, and over time that changes culture itself. I also think younger men in particular are struggling in ways society often ignores. A lot of boys grow up today without strong guidance, without discipline, without meaningful direction. Then the internet raises them, and the internet is not designed to make people strong. It's designed to keep people consuming. That includes porn. A lonely teenage boy with anxiety and insecurity can disappear into online porn for years without anybody noticing, and because it's private, shame builds silently. A lot of people struggling with porn addiction never talk about it, especially men, because they feel embarrassed, weak, broken, so they hide it. Then the cycle continues. Stress, loneliness, boredom, porn, temporary relief, guilt, repeat. And the scary thing is how young this cycle starts now. Kids are getting exposed during stages of brain development where habits become deeply wired. No previous generation dealt with this level of access. Sexuality itself is not the problem. The problem is industrialized digital stimulation available infinitely at all times. There's a difference between natural attraction and algorithm driven addiction. Porn affects motivation more than people realize because motivation often comes from tension, desire, wanting connection, purpose, achievement. When people constantly escape discomfort through stimulation, they lose some of the drive that pushes them forward. Why work on confidence when artificial validation is easier? Why risk rejection when fantasy requires nothing? Why improve social skills when isolation feels more comfortable? These habits slowly shape identity, and identity shapes life. One thing I find interesting is how often people defend porn aggressively, even when they privately admit it hurts them. I think part of that is because modern culture treats self control like oppression. Any criticism of unhealthy habits gets interpreted as judgment. But there's nothing judgmental about encouraging discipline. Discipline is what allows people to control their impulses instead of being controlled by them. And honestly, I think younger generations are starving for discipline, even if they don't realize it. Because endless comfort usually creates emptiness, not fulfillment. You can see it everywhere. People are overstimulated but emotionally exhausted, connected online but lonely in real life, constantly entertained but unable to focus. Porn fits directly into that broader problem. It's part of a culture built around instant gratification. And instant gratification feels amazing in the short term. But humans are not built to live entirely in the short term. We need meaning, challenge, purpose, connection, sacrifice, things that take effort. Real life is slower than the internet. That's probably one of the hardest adjustments for modern generations. The internet trained people to expect intensity all the time. But real happiness usually comes from consistency, not intensity. A good relationship is not constant excitement. A meaningful life is not nonstop stimulation. And mental health cannot survive endless dopamine overload forever. I also think porn has changed how people see themselves physically. Body image issues have exploded. Young men think they aren't masculine enough. Young women feel pressure to look perfect constantly. Everybody compares themselves to edited images and unrealistic standards. Social media already does this. Porn magnifies it. Because now insecurity becomes tied directly to sexuality and desirability. That can destroy confidence, especially during adolescence. Another uncomfortable truth is that many people use porn emotionally, not sexually. They use it when stressed, lonely, rejected, depressed, anxious, bored. That matters because the brain starts linking emotional relief with the habit itself, which makes quitting harder. And I think that's why some people become defensive when this topic comes up, like because deep down they know they're not fully in control of it anymore. Again, not everybody, but enough people that it deserves serious discussion. And I think society failed younger generations by refusing to have balanced conversations about it. Everything became extremes. Either porn is completely harmless and empowering, or it's evil and everyone who watches it is ruined. Reality is more complicated, but pretending there are zero consequences is intellectually dishonest, especially when so many people privately admit the negative effects. There are entire online communities of people talking about brain fog, desensitization, lack of motivation, intimacy problems, anxiety, and compulsive habits connected to excessive porn use. Now, are all of those experiences scientifically perfect evidence? No, but human experiences still matter. If millions of people are independently saying this habit is negatively affecting my life, maybe society should stop laughing at them. I think one of the saddest parts is how many young people now experience sexuality primarily through screens instead of relationships. That changes emotional development. Humans are social creatures. We are wired for connection, not isolation. And while technology gives the illusion of connection, it often replaces the real thing instead. That's true with social media, it's true with dating apps, and it's definitely true with porn. Younger generations are growing up in a world where everything is available instantly except genuine closeness, and genuine closeness is exactly what humans actually need most. The good news is that people can change, brains adapt, habits can be broken, attention spans can recover, confidence can improve, relationships can heal, but recovery usually starts with honesty, with admitting something might actually be affecting you, not because somebody online told you to feel guilty, but because you personally recognize the impact. I think moderation and awareness matter more than denial. People should be able to ask themselves difficult questions honestly. Is this helping my life? Is this hurting my motivation? Is this affecting how I view relationships? Is this becoming compulsive? Am I using this to escape reality? Those questions matter, and I think younger generations deserve honest conversations instead of silence or mockery. Because right now, many people feel trapped between extremes. They either get shamed harshly or told there's absolutely nothing wrong. Neither response helps. What helps is understanding, self awareness, discipline, and rebuilding healthy relationships with technology overall. Because this issue is bigger than porn. Porn is part of a much larger cultural shift toward overstimulation and artificial gratification. And I think future generations will probably look back at this era the same way we look back at cigarettes in old advertisements. People once promoted smoking everywhere before fully understanding the consequences. Now everybody looks back and says, how did society normalize that? I honestly think future conversations about internet addiction, including pornography, may sound very similar. Not because sexuality is wrong, but because unlimited digital stimulation affects the brain in ways we are only beginning to fully understand. And if there's one thing I want people to take away from this lecture, it's this: your attention matters. What you repeatedly consume shapes your mind, what shapes your mind shapes your habits, and your habits eventually shape your life. The newer generations did not choose to grow up inside an algorithm driven world, but they do have a choice in how consciously they live inside it. And maybe the first step is simply being willing to question whether constant stimulation is actually making people happier. Because judging by rising like loneliness, anxiety, depression, isolation, and disconnection, I think a lot of people already know the answer. 16 healthy college students and 5 college students with severe internet pornography addiction were invited to participate in the experiment and watch a pornographic video. Functional near infrared spectroscopy, FNIRS, was used to measure the dynamic changes in hemoglobin in the brain during a 10-minute session of viewing internet pornography. Participants completed the Stroop Color and Word Task (SCWT) before and after they had watched the video. Facial expressions and life signs were measured continuously during the experiment. Compared with the group that frequently viewed pornographic videos, the group with low frequency pornography viewing exhibited enhanced functional connectivity in the inferior prefrontal cortex and pars triangularis of Broca's area in the frontal lobe, the primary somatosensory cortex in the parietal lobe, and the premotor and supplementary motor cortices. Moreover, the high frequency pornography viewing group exhibited hyperactive parasympathetic activity, more pronounced sexual arousal, and stronger functional connectivity in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and frontopolar area. After viewing the pornography, the high frequency group demonstrated longer reaction times and significantly reduced accuracy while completing the Stroop Color and Word Test (SCWT) compared to the low frequency group, and also their own performance before and after viewing the pornography. As a 21-year-old male, I'm quite shocked how far behind society is and how oblivious people are to the issue. Maybe because it's a taboo subject, but media and people in power seem extremely reluctant to even discuss the topic, let alone introduce legislation protecting the youth of today from content which is completely inappropriate for them. The number of teenage boys and young men who actively watch porn is absolutely staggering. In my personal experience, it is almost commonplace. And I've been struggling with a porn addiction for around 8 years now, having discovered it at the age of 13. Hearing other guys your age constantly boasting about watching it and actively talking about it, my curiosity naturally got the better of me. A single Google search led me to sexual images, which led to a porn website which offered a large collection of sex and porn videos with various categories and countless different women. At age of 15, I decided to join Twitter as a means of engaging with others who had the same interests and hobbies as me. It allowed me to keep up to date with any new players my favorite football club had signed and general news from the club. I started following many other users who shared content relating to football and discovered that the majority of people I interacted with were teenage boys, like me, who had their favorite player in their profile picture. This particular group of users are known as football Twitter on the platform. And yet, even on a public social media platform, I encountered many overage girls and women wearing football shirts in their profile picture, interacting with the users of football Twitter, in the hope that the users would click on their profile and see the many topless photos, which were all accompanied by a link to the female's OnlyFans, where they post nude content which can only be seen by users who pay. They are exploiting teenage boys, setting them up for a life of addiction and hurt, all so that they can make some quick cash. Imagine the outcry if grown men posted nude photos on Twitter whilst interacting with teenage girls, exploiting them for profit. It would be all over the news. To be completely honest, porn destroyed me. I struggled to make eye contact with any women, be it girls my age, teachers, or even family members. As a young Christian who attended Mass every Sunday, I carried immense guilt and the burden of feeling I had committed irreversible sins. I stopped taking communion. I believed that I was already destined for hell, so I became detached from God, as it was far easier to doubt than to believe and know that you would be eventually separated from your entire family, burning in pits of fire. It was desperate, and I was stuck in an endless cycle, going days or weeks without it, hoping I had finally broken free, only to inevitably fall to temptation and watch it again. I wouldn't wish my experience on any teenage boy. And throughout all of this, can you guess how many genuine age checks or verification I ran into along the way? None. Not a single one. And I can assure you, despite some countries introducing mandatory age checks for adult websites, any age checks or verification that exists today consists of a pop up notifying the user that they are about to encounter adult content and ask them to either click confirm if they are over the age of 21 or click go back if they are under. From firsthand experience, anyone under the age of 21 is more than capable of clicking confirm, so the pop up is practically pointless. Although porn isn't officially classified or recognized as an addiction, from firsthand experience, it is ridiculously difficult to stop watching it. So much so that I am still fighting myself on a daily basis, trying to prevent myself from caving in. I guarantee that if you asked 1,000 teenage boys or young men who actively watch porn to see if they could go without it for a month, no more than 50 would. I'm angry at the government for letting this happen, for not having legislation in place to prevent me being exposed to content which I clearly wasn't ready for, and for making me constantly angry and disappointed in myself throughout my teenage years. But most of all, I'm disappointed in society that there aren't more people out there advocating for legislation, that there isn't a movement or hashtags on Twitter, that there aren't petitions being signed calling on the government to take action. It's like everyone feels that it's okay for a 1 billion-pound industry to continue exploiting young men and boys, hoping that they succumb to addiction and turn into brainless zombie like creatures that cut themselves off from the world until their lives consist of nothing but porn. Watching porn all day and spending every last penny they own on porn. I don't want my younger brothers or cousins to have to go through what I went through as a teenager. It was rough. Yet to think how easy it would be for them to fall into the same endless cycle as me makes me sick to my stomach. Imagine being 12 years old, you're curious, confused, hormones are hitting like a truck. Nobody explains relationships properly, nobody explains intimacy properly. So, where do teenagers go? The internet. And within seconds, literally seconds, a kid can access more sexual content than any human being in history ever could. No age check that actually works, no emotional preparation, no understanding of what they're watching, just instant exposure. Now, here's the thing people usually get wrong. This conversation is not about shaming people for watching porn. A lot of teenagers stumble across it accidentally. A lot get curious naturally. And for many people, it never becomes a serious problem. But for others, especially during adolescence, when the brain is still developing, constant exposure can shape expectations, relationships, self image, motivation, and even mental health in ways most teens don't realize until years later.